Yep, we see it.
Okay.
You're good to go.
So this is going to be a intro, and one thing that I can't really stress enough throughout this is that I am by no means an expert in Git. I wouldn't even call myself like good. I just know how to Google for it, and that's just what I recommend you do. If you have a question about it, just Google it. Someone else has almost definitely run into the same thing, and there are tons and tons of resources out there that you can use. And then I'm also going to be using a just really simple example repository I made to show you guys some stuff. I encourage you to pull it up as you follow along. There's also going to be a couple of resources I'm going to point to that I encourage you to look at and to keep in mind if you have any questions about what I'm doing or what I talk about. And then this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, is Git versus GitHub. So Git itself is a revision control system that was written by Linus Torvalds, 2005, for his work on the Linux kernel. And it is the sort of basic tool that GitHub is built on top of. So GitHub just provides a centralized server for hosting Git repositories. However, Git by itself doesn't need to work with GitHub. Git can exist all by itself. And what might make it a bit confusing is that GitHub provides some additional features. What these actually are doesn't really matter at the moment, but if you know what they are, great. But they're just additional things that GitHub provides that Git doesn't. And I just think it's important to keep in mind that GitHub and Git are separate. And when I say GitHub, it could be GitLab or GitFox. They all provide very similar features for the most part. Okay, so the basics of what you need to know for 90% of what you're going to do with Git are essentially just the commands I've put right there. I'll go through each of them in a little bit. However, I just want to show you right now so that you can look at it as I'm going through this, is some resources. So if we look at this, if you just Google Git cheat sheet, you're going to find some very nice tutorials and PDFs that you can follow along with that explain almost all the commands better than I can. And there's a lot more than I actually ever use in here. So I just encourage you to look through that as you're watching this. So the first thing is essentially, which I'm sure many of you have done before, is to just make a change and commit it and see what's happened. So on the right here, I have a repository that just has a README in it. And I'm just going to add one line to the README. And now if we add that, well, actually, wait. So this. So right now, Git is telling us when we run git status that we've modified the README file. And so now, in order to actually commit it, we want to add the README. And so what that does, it puts it into staging. And I'll show you why that sort of concept of staging exists in a moment, but it can be really helpful. So if we do git add README, then if we run git status again, we've changed it. It's now in green though, because it's to show that we've added it and it's in staging. Now if we do git commit, I can enter a commit message. And if we look at git status again, we're good. Now if I look at git log, it'll show us the last couple commits. and you can see that the most recent commit I did was to add a new line in the README. And so right now, this is going to be a fairly important note, is that the branch I'm currently on is the main branch. However, generally, you do not want to actually commit to the main branch. If you imagine it, that your sort of Git repository is a tree, you don't want to mess up the trunk of the tree and have it fall over. A lot of the times, your main branch is what your production system is actually running on if you have a CI set up. And so any commit to that could be causing problems and causing your service to crash and impacting your customers, which you don't want to do. And so that is why branches exist. And so let's say I want to make a new feature. I'm gonna do git checkout-b. And so what this does is it just creates a new branch with the name dev-new-feature. So now if I create a new file, so we can see that it's seeing the new file, and if I run git branch right now, it's showing that I'm on the dev new feature branch. And so this allows you to separate out the code that you're just testing versus code that you know you actually want to use. And so if I commit this, then it's committed, we can see it here. And now if I go and check out master or the main, if I list again, notice how that file is not in our main branch yet. And so that's sort of the whole point, is that we don't want the code we're just testing to infect our main branch. Now let's say I want to create a second feature. And add another file here. The details of this aren't really super important right now. I think it's more important to just keep in mind what I'm doing and that you're switching branches to sort of isolate your code. And so if I add this, you can see that work. We can check which branch we're on. We're on the second feature. And if we list, we have the README and the second file. Now, if you're paying attention, you might notice that there is no new file, which was what I made in the first branch that we created. And so that's because I created this branch from the main branch. And so if we use this tool, you can see that right now I'm on the second feature branch, and this came off main. However, let's say I wanted to get the first feature I made into this branch. You can do git merge and then dev-new feature, the name of our original branch. And that will pull in all of the changes that we made in our first branch and pull it into our second branch. So this allows you to essentially take one feature you're working on and combine it with a second feature, all without actually touching the main branch of your repository, so that you know the main branch is still safe. So here, I'm just going to leave their default commit message. And now, if we look at our tree again, you can see here that I created the second feature, and then I merged it back into this branch. So that's what this is showing right here. And so right now, when I list what's in the directory, we have both the new file and the second file. And so this is all within our second branch. And all the while, if we go back and look at our main branch, we still only have the README that we started with. And so that is sort of the gist of branching. And I'll be honest, that's probably 80% of the Git commands I use regularly. That being said, Git is extremely large. Well, not extremely. It is a large project, and there are lots of features that you can use, but you do not have to use by any means. And most of the times, you don't need to use them. And so right now, I'm just going to show you guys what we can do. So, right, I made this repository and I added it to my GitHub account. So if you look at the bottom, you can see the, right, that's a SSH Git that I have as the remotes. And so what those are just the servers that this repository will push and pull from. And so right now, both the new dev new feature and dev second feature are only on my laptop. If we go look at the repository on GitHub, you can only see the main and then a branch I made about an hour ago that has a dev new file. Yeah, sorry about the naming. That could have been better. But just notice that those branches, or the branches we made here, don't exist on the remote yet. And so what we can do if we want to put them there is do a git push origin dev-new feature. And now if we go back to GitHub, you can see it just showed up here. You can look at the text here and see that it pushed it to the remote. And now I'm gonna make a digression real quick just to show you guys something I wanted to mention a bit earlier. But there's one really useful website that I use all the time called Explain Shell. And so what this does is it just it helps you sort of see what a command is doing. For example, here's one that GitHub, you might recognize. GitHub tells you to run it when you first create a repository, set up the remote as the remote for your local repository. What exactly it does, I don't really care about now, but this is just to show that this can be a really helpful tool for explaining what every part of a command does. Even beyond Git, like any bash command that you find in Stack Overflow, rather than just copying and pasting it in and hoping it doesn't destroy your computer, you can actually check and see what it does and try to understand it first, which is a good idea just from a security perspective. But yeah, that can be a really helpful utility. Okay, so going back to Git, so we pushed it to GitHub right here. Right now we're on our new feature branch. And let's say we're ready to actually put this new feature into production. Then what we can do is open a pull request. And if you have a good memory, you might remember that a pull request is one of those features that aren't really Git, but they're more GitHub or the Git providers. So GitLab has them too. And what they essentially are is merges that have some additional stuff built on top of them. For example, you can request someone to review the pull request before it can actually be merged. You can set up testing to automatically run whenever a pull request is opened, so you can see if it actually breaks anything in your code. And So you can do that type of stuff with pull requests that isn't really available just in plain Git. And so right now I can just add a message. And if I create the pull request, you get this type of page. And so what this is sort of the intermediate. So I've opened it, and now what this is often used for in big projects is to comment on other people's code to make sure that they haven't made any changes everyone else isn't happy with. And so that allows you to have sort of back and forth before it actually gets merged in. And now let's say I'm happy with it. We've had reviewers look at it. It's not going to break anything. Then we can just merge the pull request. It'll autofill the commit message. And now if we go and look at our main branch, you can see we have this new file that we made in our new feature branch. And so if we go back here, we're right now on main. However, we still don't have that in this. So what we can do is do a git fetch. And so what that does is essentially sync up the .git folder in our local repository, which is where essentially all of our repos data is stored, with the remotes backend sort of data. And so now if we do a git, so right now we do a git pull, that'll merge the remote in to the local. And if we can list, we can see that our new file is now showing up on our main branch. And so that's about most of what you need to do. Now for some cleanup. And to be honest, I can never actually remember how to actually delete a local branch. So we can just go Google and essentially click on whatever link we feel like. And there in about 10 seconds, we have our answer. So git branch -d. And now that branch is gone. And so that is about all I ever actually do with Git for the most part. And if you can do that, then you're well on your way to being able to do anything you really need to do. There's lots of stuff Git can do that you might never even need to do, but that's about most of it that I use and a lot of people use on an everyday basis. And so I encourage you to go look at other resources. There's lots of them out there. If you want to learn more about specific parts of what I did, there's the Git handbook, which is pretty comprehensive. And there's lots of others out there if you want it. And that's about it. And now if you think this thing on the bottom right of the slide is a joke, I'll have you know, someone actually made that into a real project. But yeah, so there's lots of stuff out there. There's lots of stuff Git can do that you might never need to do. I encourage you to go look at it, and Google is your friend, so use it.
That was really good, Ian. I like that. And
yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, in general too, whenever I get a question about Git, normally I forgot, so I normally look it up and then answer the question. So Google is definitely your friend. I agree. But yeah, any questions for Ian or anything?
Is it possible to merge more than one branch at a time? Or is it like just not wise to?
I'm not sure how that would work. I can Google it and see if you're right, if you can.
I would think you'd want to merge one branch into another branch and then merge that branch into the next branch or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks like you can.
When you just do like the normal merge, does that like merge always into main, or can you like? I'm guessing you can probably merge two branches like into each other that are not main.
Yeah, so if you just do git merge and then the branch name, it'll merge into whatever branch you're currently in. So if I was in branch 2, it would merge into branch 2.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's good to know. And then I haven't really seen git fetch before. What's the difference between that and git pull? Like, why do we do that and then, or why are we doing that and then pull?
Yeah, so git pull, it syncs up your local with the remote repository, and then it merges in whatever the remote had into your current, into your local. Whereas git fetch, all it does is sync up the sort of backend data store, the .git folder with GitHub. And so when you run git pull, it's doing a git fetch in the background first, and then it's doing a git merge with what the remote had into your local.
Okay. So do you have to do fetch before then? Or is it just like for demonstration purposes?
No, I don't know. I'm in the habit of doing it. I don't know why.
Okay. Sounds good. Cool. Well, yeah, good stuff. I thought it was really helpful. Like, I thought it was really, you explained everything really well. And I liked how you were doing it live too. It's bold.
And there's a couple of things in there that aren't actually default Git. For example, you might have seen me do a Git LGB and get sort of a nice tree structure out of it. That's not built into Git. Well, it is, but that command isn't. So if you Google git show branch tree, the first Stack Overflow answer is where I got that code, and it just sets a sort of alias for that command that can be helpful for just visualizing it. There's a couple other things like git open that aren't actually built into Git.
Okay. Here, was it, I think it was this one. I put it in the chat. I think it's that one.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Cool. All right. Yeah, great job. Any other questions? Cool. Well, thanks for presenting, Ian. Good job.
Yeah, thanks. Just one thing